that the Austro-Hungarian Empire's army wasn't the most effective army in the World War One, but to say that they were the worst army, well, that's not really fair. Especially if we looking at the countries they were fighting against. Russia collapsed in 1917, Italy only managed to break through the Austro-Hungarian defense line by the end of the war, and Italy only had to fight in one front, while Austro-Hungarian Empire was fighting on the eastern front, on the southern front, on the Italian front, also sending units to helping Turkey, and some of the units made it to the western front to help Germany with some of the offensives. But in this video I want to compare the German Imperial Army and the Austro-Hungarian Imperial Army. How do they compare to each other, as they were allied, and we quite often just say that, oh yeah, the Austro-Hungarian army was very ineffective or small or incompetent, which I don't think is fair to say, but let's look at the numbers. How these two different armies compare to each other. First, what we have to look at is the populations of the countries. Germany was much bigger. The population in 1914 was around 65 million, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire was around 51.5 million. Another important part we have to focus on, that while Germany's population was mainly Germans or people identifying themselves as Germans, nevertheless they did have minorities such as a Polish minority in Eastern Germany, which was originally part of the Polish kingdom, Danish minority in the north. Compared to this one, the Austro-Hungarian Empire mainly were built up for many small different minorities. So for example, Austrians and Hungarians were the two big population demographic group of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but there were Ukrainians, Poles, Serbs, Croats, Slavons, Italians, Romanians, and none of them was like a small minority. And this affected the effectiveness of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's army heavily, as none of these soldiers had an Austro-Hungarian entity. None of them looked at the Austro-Hungarian Empire as their home country, as none of these nations ended up in the Austro-Hungarian Empire by their own choice. First, we need to look at how many soldiers each empire fielded in the beginning of the war. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had around 3 million soldiers in 1914, while Germany had 3.8 million, which is not that much of a difference, but if you look at that, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was smaller in population. Also, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was less industrialized as Germany. This 3 million soldiers missing from the economy was actually a quite big blow to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The total number of soldiers during World War I for Austro-Hungarian Empire, they managed to recruit and field around 7.8 million soldiers, while Germany fielded just over 13 million. Please note, these numbers are estimated, as it's very difficult to find accurate numbers, and many different sources state different numbers. As per combat losses, the Austro-Hungarian Empire suffered around 1.5 million losses, and Germany over 2 million soldiers. Next to this one, there were also the wounded and injured soldiers. The Austro-Hungarian Empire lost over 3.6 million of soldiers who got injured or wounded, and German Empire had 2.8 million. So these were the numbers. So the important numbers take away that Germany managed to recruit and field 13 million soldiers during the 4 years of conflict, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire 7.8 million. But the number of soldiers not only what matters, what they're fighting with. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany also knew that they have to have a strong artillery units to support their infantry. Germany being a more industrial empire, they had better artillery systems, they had more artillery systems, they could build more and better ones. Austro-Hungarian Empire had less, and the artillery units were more outdated. For example, some of them on the Eastern Front were using still black gunpowder, which was creating so much smoke that it instantly gave away the position of the artillery unit. In the beginning of the war in 1914, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had around 2,610 artillery units, and Germany had around 7,000. But these ones also includes the field units and the units which are stationed in the fortresses, strongholds and training units. Germany was more prepared for the war. They were preparing for the war against France and against Russia. However, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was only aiming to have a short local war against Serbia and maybe a fight against Russia, but they were not prepared for an all-out world war. Both countries are built a lot of artillery units during the war, and Germany ended the war with around 11,000 artillery units, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire with around 7,900. The next important part is the number of tanks. This is a quite interesting one because actually the first patent for tank or first tank was from the Austro-Hungarian Empire from 1912 when the Motorgeschütz was built and patented. This tank design was introduced to the German Empire and to the Austro-Hungarian High Command as well, but both of them looked at this new weapon and they were like, we don't need this, we already have cavalry, artillery, infantry, this is pointless. Funny that few years later actually reinvention of the tank was which decided the war, because with the tank they could just break through the trenches. Nevertheless, Germany designed their own tank, the A7V, and they fielded 18 tanks. Austro-Hungarian Empire did none. They didn't have any tanks, didn't capture any. We also have to think about, like, in Eastern Front was already collapsed, there was no reason there for using tanks. The Southern Front, again, it wasn't a trench warfare by 1916, 1917, so there was no use of a tank. And the Italian front was a mountain front up in the Alps mountain, so there was no point to use a tank there either. Next branch of the army is the Air Force. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, although had a very competent leader of the Air Force, but unfortunately the Austro-Hungarian Empire's industrial base couldn't produce enough planes to keep them in the fight against the Entente powers. The Austro-Hungarian Empire managed to build 5,180 airplanes during the First World War, while Germany managed to build and send to the front line 48,537 airplanes. That's including fighters and also bombers. The next very interesting part is about the navy. Of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was actually quite modern, up to date. That's because they started the naval race decades later behind Germany, France, Great Britain. The dreadnoughts were up to date, they were very powerful. The cruisers were very competent. However, the High Command decided, and Admiralty, that they're not gonna use any of those ships. So they spent most of their time in the port in Pola. The only few times they actually been used when Italy joined the war, and then they bombed few Italian cities, ports, and by the end of the war, when they wanted to break the blockade by the end of the Adriatic Sea, unfortunately they been discovered on the way there and they lost the Szent István dreadnought, which is also the first ever recorded dreadnought which sank. But comparing the numbers, Germany had 47 battleships, this also including pre-dreadnoughts, and Austro-Hungarian Empire had 15. Although the number Germany had a much bigger number, much higher number, they also had access to higher seas, the North Sea and Atlantic Ocean. Austro-Hungarian Empire only had access to Adriatic Sea and Mediterranean Sea, but that also was blockaded, so the fleet couldn't really utilize. Cruiser-wise, Germany again had 57 cruisers and the Austro-Hungarian Empire had 13. Torpedo boats wise, they're very close. Torpedo boats was a very favored kind of ship to offset differences against bigger navies. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire had 79, while Germany had 91. Destroyer wise, again we are a same difference as the bigger ships. Germany had 143, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire built 27 destroyers. Number of other boats, here actually the Austro-Hungarian Empire had more ships. That's due to the Austro-Hungarian Empire also maintained the Danube fleet, so with monitors and small warships on the Danube River. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire owed the Danube fleet and the miscellaneous support ships, they had 21, while Germany had only 6. And the last part are the submarines. Submarine-wise, Germany was way ahead of Austro-Hungarian Empire. They put in 373 in the water during the war, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire only did 28. Actually, the Austro-Hungarian Empire's submarine fleet was quite effective, quite active, and they sunk quite a few ships. Quite interestingly, they also damaged one Japanese destroyer that was patrolling the Aegean Sea in 1917. If you compare the U-boat fleet of Germany and Austro-Hungarian Empire, you can see that the Austro-Hungarian Empire had 28 submarines, while Germany had 377. From this fleet, the Austro-Hungarian Empire lost 8 submarines, while the German Empire lost 178, which is quite a huge loss. But as performance-wise, Germany sunk over 5,000 civilian or merchant ships, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire's fleet did 119. If we look at the warships and military ships they sunk, Germany sunk 207, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire sunk 13. And then if you look at the numbers at how effective they were, the average ships by submarine being sank in Austro-Hungarian Empire was 4.71, while in Germany almost 14. And if you look at how many submarines been sunk for how many losses, you could see that in Austro-Hungarian Empire for one lost submarine they sunk around 6.5, while in Germany for one lost submarine they did sink almost 30. But also we have to point out that while Germany had access to the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, they could attack more ships, they could attack the merchant lines and the support lines, while Austro-Hungarian Empire only had access to the Adriatic Sea and limited access to the Mediterranean Sea if they could sneak through by the blockade. So as we see, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had much smaller, less effective army, but again, I wouldn't really say that they had the worst army in the First World War. They did make mistakes. Also, the leadership of Austro-Hungarian army was very confident in their soldiers and in the army, and this was a false confidence, and this paid a price. The first few offensives in Serbia and in Russia caused so much damage in the beginning of the war that they couldn't really recover from that because they lost their best trained units, they lost their best equipped units, and after that point they couldn't recover from that heavy losses. Nevertheless, they kept fighting and they kept it together until the end of the war. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and see you in the next one.